program is brought to you by Agnes Scott College. For more information about Agnes Scott College, please visit our website at agnesscott.edu.
I would like to call up one of our alumni board members and one of my wonderful classmates from the class of 1987, Keisha Cunningham.
Good afternoon. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to serve as MC, if you will, for this very august occasion. And I have to admit that when we were taking part in the selection of this year's award recipients, it was truly humbling to look at the bodies of work that Agnes Scott College has produced in its alumni. And President Keish, President Schmidt, I don't think there are any other prior presidents here. I want to say thank you for your leadership in helping to make the world a better place. Because the women that we are about to honor are outstanding. Now, that's not to say that there are not hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of outstanding women who were nominated to be recognized in this manner. And so keep those nominations coming, because we are making the world a better place. I would like to go ahead and acknowledge the other committee members who we spent an afternoon reading all these wonderful biographies and nomination letters, and it's one of the hardest jobs we have to try to figure out who deserves to be recognized in this way. So the other committee members are Genevieve Chenault, who is actually the chair from class of 54. We have Joe Cranford-Hodges, class of 2000. Carla Sepik McKenna, where are you, Carla? She is class of 83. Catherine Mitchell, class of 68. And Kim Vickers, my fellow classmate, of class of 1987. Please forgive me if I mess up the mission statement, because I haven't quite had a tattoo on the forehead, but I'm working on it. And the women that we have that we're going to be recognizing truly fulfill the mission. Agnes Scott College educates women to think deeply, live honorably, and engage in the social and intellectual challenges of her time. Right? Good job. And the women that we are recognizing certainly do that. And I'd like to call up Catherine Mitchell, one of last year's awardees, to introduce our Service to the College Award.
It is an honor to introduce Harriet King, this year's recipient of the Service to the College Award. She has served on the Board of Trustees for 30 years, the last 7 of which she chaired the board. While many people have shaped the college, Harriet King is among a handful who would have had major influence on the Agnes Scott of today and the Agnes Scott of the future. She's provided sustained leadership and a continuous vision for growth in all significant areas of the college. As early as 1979, she chaired the Academic Affairs Committee, ensuring that Agnes Scott would offer an ever-evolving curriculum that is responsive to the changing world. She led the Buildings and the Grounds Committee during the college's $120 million building program, the result, a transformed campus. Recognizing that enrollment was the key to the college's future, she assumed leadership in the early 1990s and currently chairs the Enrollment Planning Committee. Today, Agnes Scott has more applicants than ever for the fall of 2009. And most recently, she chaired the committee that brought us President Quiche. What amazes me further is that Harriet King balanced all the time that she's given to the college with the demands of raising 2 daughters and having a distinguished career that has included being a lawyer in private practice, teaching at Harvard, Vanderbilt, and Emory, and serving as vice provost for academic affairs at Emory University. What a role model. How wonderful that we're recognizing Harriet King today, particularly this weekend in the presence of her classmates who are celebrating their 45th reunion. Join me in welcoming Harriet King and in thanking her for her service to the college.
One of the things I haven't learned is how to work these things. The first comment I want to make on this occasion is thank you. To say how much I appreciate the fact that my friends, colleagues, co-workers, co-trustees have supported the Alumnae Association in doing this. And I do thank all of you. My second thought is that were you to ask my classmates who is the least likely member of our class to be supportive of the college for 30 years, I'm pretty sure my name would have been on the short list. And so it is with a certain kind of surprise that I find myself in this position. And I'd like to share with you a couple of just momentary thoughts on that topic, that is the topic of surprise. The first is that when I joined the Board of Trustees at Agnes Scott, which was back in 1976, I really thought our mission was fundamentally to put ourselves out of business, by which I mean I assumed that the world would develop in such a way that the need for women's colleges would disappear. I was wrong, totally. And the second big surprise is how important women's colleges do in fact remain. The Women's College Coalition recently has done a little bit of research on the effect of attending a women's college. And I certainly had assumed that for those of us who went to women's colleges back then, that was the only real choice. We'd say, yeah, it's a good place, learn a lot, important. But that those who had graduated in, let's say, the last 15 or 20 years, where there were real options available, would say, well, it's okay, you know, they paid me not to go, or whatever the thing might be, whatever my dead body, glad I went. Well, it turns out that young women, I'm going to characterize them as young because in my life everybody's young now, have reported that those who go to women's colleges find that their self-confidence increases. Those who go to co-ed colleges, be they liberal arts, where they tend to stay roughly the same as it was when they went in, or leading public universities where their confidence tends to decline, that what we add, and we are a diminishing number, shall we say, is perhaps more important than it was when I was a student here. And so if you take nothing away today from my fabulous remarks and moment of entertainment and joy, I hope you will take away with you the fact that women's colleges remain critical to the future of the world, and Agnes Scott is a gem that is making that future happen. Do not let this place die. Do not let this place be one that you look back in 10 or 15 or 30 or 40 years and say, I wish I'd done something. I wish I had loved that place. This is the time, and the time is now. Thank you.
a little shorter than Harriet. It is my great pleasure to get to share the story of our outstanding alumna for service to the community, Louisa Eichel McIntosh Edwards, class of 1947, known to her classmates as Ike. I first met Louisa when I applied for a job at her art gallery at the McIntosh Gallery in 1990, 3 years after I graduated from Agnes Scott. She definitely did not hire me because I had experience. But she gave me a chance because I was a fellow Scottie, something she reminded me of a good bit. I worked for Louisa for 3 years, and in that time I really got to see her in action, not only as an incredible businesswoman, but as a dedicated mother, a mentor, and civic leader. By the time I started working for Louisa, she was already a legend in the Midtown community. Many of you remember what Midtown used to look like in the 70s and the 80s. It was the complete opposite of the beautiful skyline we see today. In fact, it was quite seedy. And it was during this time that Louisa, a widow with 4 young children, opened her first business, an interior design shop in Midtown. As a business owner, she was a little bit concerned about some of her neighbors, and she decided to get involved with the Midtown Business Association and ultimately became president of the organization. One of her many achievements was working with Atlanta Landmarks, Inc. to save the fabulous Fox. This was when Southern Bell wanted to tear it down and build an office. In addition to the countless volunteer hours she spent investing in the rejuvenation of Midtown, she was also on the board of the Atlanta Fulton County Library for 10 years and served as the chair from 1983 to 1985. Books were one of Louisa's passions, and art was the other. Louisa's third contribution to the Atlanta community was her support for the arts, particularly the work of African American artists. Louisa represented big names like Romeo Bearden and Jacob Lawrence and Benny Andrews, but she also represented young burgeoning Black artists. At the time, the McIntosh Gallery was completely unique in representing so many artists of color, and the gallery was called on annually to provide works for shows that were part of Black History Month and also the National Black Arts Festival here in Atlanta. Louisa was an amazing woman, and I was a sponge when I worked for her, soaking up more than I realized at the time. Many things that have become such a part of who I am. So I wanted to share some of the things I learned from Louisa. One of the first things was that giving one's time for a good cause is important and worthwhile. I also learned that every woman should know how to do basic wall repair, painting, and be able to hang a picture. That networking is something you should do every day. You can be a great mother and businesswoman at the same time. Mac computers are more fun than PCs. Positive thinking can lead to positive outcomes. Don't have drinks at a business lunch. And that having a sense of humor is a good thing. I was thrilled when I got to call Louisa in November of 2008 to tell her that she had won the award. Unfortunately, Louisa passed away on February 23rd, so we will be presenting this award posthumously. Accepting the award in Louisa's memory is her sister, Mary Eichel Sanford, class of 1949, a former award winner herself and the one who nominated Louisa for this award. Joining her to say a few words is Louisa's oldest daughter, Alexa Self. Can you please join me on the platform?
My mother was so thrilled at this award, and we are all honored to be here to represent her. I'm glad to accept this on behalf of my brothers, my sister, my cousins who were here, my aunt will, I hope, say a word or two. And I wanted to just share with you a brief experience I've had. I'm not an Agnes Scott alum, but I had a fun experience with my mom and myself and Agnes Scott a few years ago. I'm sure you're all aware of the Writers' Festival that is here every year. And as Kim said, Mom was a book lover, as am I. And I saw the paper back, I don't know, 2000, 2001, that John Updike was going to be speaking and reading at Agnes Scott. The tickets were free, but you had to call to get the ticket. So I got on the phone, and just to my dismay, there were no tickets available. And our mom has always encouraged us to solve our own problems, be independent. But I thought, this is a situation that I can't handle on my own. So I picked up the phone and said, Mom, did you know John Updike's coming? And, oh, wow. You know, he also was not only a poet, novelist, he was also an outstanding art critic. And she was a big fan of his. And I said, yeah, it's just terrible. All the tickets are gone. And she said, well, let me see what I can do. I don't know. Well, about 24 hours later, she called me. And she said, well, somehow I got a couple of tickets to the John Updike reading. And we, of course, went together and had a wonderful time. It was one of many great memories that I have, and I'm sure my family members. So I'm so grateful to Agnes Scott for this, and Mom was, as I said, so appreciative and so honored herself. So, Aunt Mary, please say a word.
Well, I could say along the same line that her determination. My husband and I lived in Africa for 9 years. She finally got a chance to come visit us in 1987. And she said, now Mary, I've heard all about that legendary president of Malawi, H. Kamuzu Banda. And she said, I really would like to meet him. I said, Louisa, nobody gets to meet him without some very special invitation. Missionaries can be there for years and might see him and wave to him passing down the road and shouting at him, but me, I mean, if you were his opponent now, you might have met him with a bullet. He is now passed. He is long gone, and he was a great, I must say, he was a wonderful benefactor of Malawi. Well, anyway, so she said she'd like to meet him. I said, well, you think of some way to meet him. I said, what person do you think might know him? She said, well, I could talk to Andrew Young about this. I said, well, you do that. So she gets off the plane, and here in her hands is a letter to be hand-delivered by Louisa McIntosh to Dr. H. Kamuzu Banda. So we couldn't do a thing. We went to the State House and turned it over to them to research. They took a note of our entire itinerary. She was going to be in Malawi for 3 weeks. I had mountain climbing planned, all kinds of activities where she could really see the whole country. But they even took note of the days we were going to be on this little ship called the Log, which she couldn't believe. But anyway, we got through most of it. We're down to the last 2 days. And we're scheduled to climb Mount Mulanje. You know, we've done Mount Mulanje, that's right. We were scheduled for another mountain. And we got a call. The president will see you tomorrow at such and such time. So in our ramshackle little car, we made it to Zomba, where he resided, and were welcomed honorably. And see, we were taken into the room. There was this table, lecture table, and there were 2 little buttons there. invited to come stand before him. We didn't know if those buttons were going to be a trap door below. So we talked with well, Louisa just handled it beautifully, and said, well, Andrew Young would just love to have you visit him. We would all love to have you come to Georgia. Incidentally, he had gone to Meharry College in Tennessee during part of his training for being a doctor. He was a medical doctor, a surgeon with the Royal College of Skilled Surgeons before they called him to be president in 54, I think. 64. Anyway, she gave him a warm welcome, and he thanked her and said, well, that was one part of the country he'd never been to, and he would love to come. He didn't live long enough to come, unfortunately, but that's thankful of her determination. She was going to meet that president one way or another, and thankfully I got to meet him too. I just would like to say that, last Sunday I looked up and went to the sunrise service and saw this gorgeous sunrise. And I said to myself, the Lord has a new consultant on color. So what should I expect? So I would just say, what a beautiful difference. One life, one single life. Amen.
Well, I'm a little bit taller than other people here. It's my great pleasure to be here and to help honor one of our alumni, Judy Jackson-Rosen. And Judy, it was something else when we looked at the folder that had the information about her. There were so many pictures, and one of the pictures was something very special. There was Judy with a hard hat on. And when I called Judy several times, one of the conversations that we had when we were talking, she told me that at the time that she came to Agnes Scott was a time when women were told the purpose of going to college was to find a husband. Well, those that Judy heard saying that, those words to her, they had no idea that her marriage to an architect would lead her to finding her passion wearing a hard hat and a remarkable success in a field that was so dominated by men: home building, renovation, and remodeling. Judy and her husband formed Handcrafted Homes, Inc. in 1976. And Judy is one of only 8 women in the state of Georgia who is certified as a professional home builder. She's also a certified remodeler. Handcrafted Homes, Inc. has received numerous awards over the years for their excelling in the home building and remodeling field. The most prestigious of those awards was being the National Association of Remodeling Industries 2008 Award for Contractor of the Year for Residential Interior Specialty, and the National Association of Remodeling Industries 2007 Award for an entire house over $1 million. Right now, Judy and her company's present project is one that actually has a very special significance with its tie to Agnes Scott. They are presently working on the renovation and restoration of one of Atlanta's most historic homes located in Inman Park, that of Asa Candler, the founder of Coca-Cola Company. And please welcome Judy Mosen, class of 7. I can't even get this out now. I'm just stumbling. Sorry about that. Judy Jackson-Mosen, class of 1967. She's our Distinguished Career Alumni Award winner.
Hi, thank you. This is an honor, an unbelievable honor, and one that I share with my family, and they are all here today. I have a whole table full. Thank you to my family. That needs to be said first. And thank you, Agnes Scott. You're probably wondering, well, a political science major? What am I doing standing here before you as a recipient of an award for a career in design and construction? Agnes Scott doesn't teach that. Well, I can answer that easily. It kind of resembles what Harriet King said. A school that truly convinced me that I could do anything. That as a woman, I could be confident, strong in my convictions, and proud. It was a struggle to get to Agnes Scott, and let me take you back a few years in history. When I first told my naval officer father where I wanted to go to school, he was in shock. His reaction was similar to the words of my freshman class Black Cat song. Get thee to a nunnery, woe is me. Dad was of the school of thought that women went to college to get married. A little bit of education, okay. The real purpose was to get married. He was so determined that I go to the university in my state, where the men were, that he sent me there for an overnight visit and to attend classes. The next day I woke up and they spent 2 hours rolling hair and sitting under hair dryers in preparation to meet the men in class. I was more determined than ever that I was going to get to Agnes Scott. Dad's mistake was when he promised that I could go to a college that tuition and room and board was equivalent to the state college. While he was gone on a business trip one weekend, the letter arrived. Not only did I get accepted at Agnes Scott, but I had an honor scholarship and a work scholarship. My mom and I signed it and mailed it on Saturday. Dad returned, but the deed was done. He was positive that a skinny girl with glasses and a lot of education would be a disaster. He left me my freshman year. I stood on the steps of Inman and he at the bottom, and his parting words in disgust were, "You'll never get married." I think as my classmates know, my father was wrong. I did get married several times. But Agnes Scott was, that's no secret with this group. Agnes Scott was not an inflexible, stifling, or a finishing school. We were not taught that there was only one way to do something. We were taught to find our own way. I know how I got the strength to begin designing homes and renovations without any training. I didn't go to school after Agnes Scott for any additional training. It was the Agnes Scott professors. They encouraged us to think for ourselves, to be different, to experiment, and to try new ideas. This liberal arts education allowed me to branch out into several different directions all at one time. For me, my career was most important because I wear many hats. Doing so many different things was important that I had that background for liberal arts education. I am an artist, a dreamer, as I sit before my drawing board. I am a builder, as I wear boots covered with mud and direct the most macho of men. I am a mother, as I give my children support for their many endeavors. I am a grandmother, as I hold my precious grandchildren. I am a wife, as I wear an evening gown and dance with my husband. I am an Agnes Scott woman, armed with a superior education and a tremendous confidence in myself as a human. Once this confidence became part of my psyche, there was no going back. All of this from one particular school and in the 1960s. It was a particular time in history. We needed to learn. We were ready to learn. As women, we needed the freedom that comes from education. And for me, it was the tipping point. I was ready to say no when it mattered, and ready to speak up when it mattered. I was armed for the real world. Over the years, Agnes Scott has unleashed thousands of women into this male world, and we have been rebuilding it brick by brick ever since. Thank you, Agnes Scott.
Short still. And that was such an impressive act to follow that I have brought 2 books. Today I have the honor of announcing the presentation of an Alumnae Award to Joanne Varner Hawes, class of 1954, whose distinguished career was cut short by her untimely death a decade ago. However, her inspiration and her accomplishments live on, especially in the area of Mississippi where she spent most of her adult life. I remember Jan as a fun-loving, straight-thinking, dedicated scholar during our 4 years here at Agnes Scott together. Later, after earning degrees from the University of Mississippi, Jan returned to that university in the dual role of professor and dean of women. As teacher, administrator, author, and respected speaker, Jan remained focused on the roles of women in American life, particularly Southern life. These are the 2 books that I have brought to show you. Jan was a contributor to one and was co-editor of another, and I love this title, Sex, Race, and the Role of Women in the South. But both of these titles, this one entitled Southern Sisters, both of those indicate Jan's constant emphasis on the crusade for the empowerment of women in an era when it was not a popular undertaking. Here to tell us about Jan's successes and to accept the award for her on her behalf is Jan's sister, Barbara Varner Willoughby. Barbara was the one who nominated Jan originally, and she herself is an Agnes Scott alumna. Here right now this weekend to celebrate her 50th reunion and accompanied by her daughter who's celebrating her 25th reunion. So it's a big family affair. Please welcome Barbara Varner Willoughby.
Outstanding graduates for your creativity
and you're living life to the fullest. And I'd also like to thank Agnes Scott for all the confidence and all the education it gave a lot of us. But of course, my truest inspiration was my sister, Dr. Jan Varna Hawks. She has inspired me, and she has inspired many others. Probably a story that will help you understand her the most, and probably a lot of her friends sitting there didn't realize Jan was born with just one eye. She, of course, that this was not a big thing to her, and when people later in life said to her, "How in the world have you accomplished everything you've done?" And she said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't have to focus like the rest of you." This is the way she lived her life. She graduated from Agnes Scott. She went on to Assemblies Training School in Richmond. She was going to be a missionary and get her master's in religion. But after 1 year, she went to Mississippi to do interim work in the summertime, and Paul Hawks explained to her that Mississippi needed her worse than the Congo. Jan and Paul have 4 wonderful children, Greg, Barbara, Jenny, and Brian. And she has been a wonderful mother. But while she was a great mother, she also went to the University of Mississippi to get her master's. She was supported in that by the National Defense Scholarship, and who did she turn to but her Agnes Scott professors to recommend her? In the history department. She won that scholarship, got her master's, went on to teach at Blue Mountain College, and during that time, AAUW supported her with grants to get her PhD in 1970. Therefore, in 1972, she became Dean of Women at Ole Miss and also assistant professor. Now, she laughingly said the reason she was chosen to be a professor was the university was forced to hire a woman professor. And she was a known quantity. And I have from some of her friends here the picture of her standing with an august group of men as she helped the university go on to excel in its role of taking care of women. Jan also, in that same time, at the age of 45, had her 4th child, Brian. Some newspaper people came and to the university and asked that hot-button question that all deans of women were asked, "What is your stand on abortion?" Joanne sweetly and kindly said, "It should be obvious." This is the way she worked. She worked with humor. She worked with vision. She worked for women to excel, not herself, but for other women. So that in 1981, she was the founder and director of the Sarah Isom Center for Women's Studies. And in that work, she continued to be a professor, but she also spoke all over the South. She was a writer. She wrote one book. She was the subject of another book, and the 3rd book came out after her death, but it had been her idea and it was dedicated to her. She was a wonderful mentor to students and to co-workers, so much so that the university has many endowments in her name to honor her. She continued all of this until her untimely death in 1998. But she is remembered. She's remembered for all her writings. She's remembered for all her work with students. She's remembered with just weekly brown bag lunches at the university where famous speakers come in because she started all this. I think very few of us think that 11 years after we are gone, that we are still affecting so many people. And that's what Dr. Jan Barnhouse did. Thank you.
This is the first time I've ever come to one of these. My mom's been honored all this over and over and over and over. And I've been just a wallflower. But the thing that I remember most of Mom, 2 nights before she died, I was with Aunt Laura in North Carolina. We were in the I was in the hospital that night, spent the night in the emergency room, and we had no idea she was going to die. But I was reading in the Bible a story, John 21, and Jesus looked at those poor little pitiful disciples out there, and Peter recognized, that's Jesus, that's my Lord. And Peter jumped in the water, swam over, and Jesus said, come eat with me. And 2 nights before Mom died, I said, that's what Jesus is going to do, he's going to call her home. And since then, I teach high school, and just a lowly teacher, nothing special, but her memory and all the, how perfect she is as far as she's like gold. And I've taught my kids, go for the gold, always go for the gold. That's what my mom did. I want you to live your life the way she did, and just go for the gold. Last year, they were number 2 in the state of Mississippi out of 300 kids, so maybe she's helping to pass it on.